Black Out Loud Media Group. She wakes me up in the morning with a soft whisper and kiss on the cheek. Good morning, she says. It's time to start your day. It's so sweet and mellow that now I'm contemplating, should I get up or just chill and lay? I guess I'll get up. I go hit the shower and she's there waiting, but she's talking louder. Not disrespectfully, but to get me hype. Now I got this soap and water on my body and I'm feeling right. Some mornings I might not take her with me, but most mornings she's right here, helping me get through traffic and telling me that she'll always care. Whatever the day brings, I can count on her voice to take me to another place, change my mind, change my mood, or keep me in the mood that makes me want to sing. She can be sassy without hesitation, or she can sing words of love and dedication. She can get me hyped and ready for the gym, or she can soothe me into a place of meditation. She has been known to put a timestamp on things of the past, but we only talk about the good memories, the things we want to last. This is she, and she will always be. That is the poem She from my first book, Love Letters, a collection of poems. This is the poem that got everything started. I referenced a little bit of history behind this poem in this episode, so you guys sit back and enjoy it. I have another special guest with me this time, so I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. Welcome back to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast, the place where poetry meets conversation. I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and before we get into today's topic, make sure you hit that plus sign so you don't miss an episode. Also, please subscribe to my blog, thebrownssugarcafe.blog, and if you find any value in this episode or any other episodes, make sure you leave a heartfelt review. So with that being said, let's get to it. Welcome back to another episode, and today I have a special guest, Val the Voice Johnson from Interludes. Val, how are you?
I'm doing great, Terrence. It's great to be here in the Brown Sugar Cafe. Woo-hoo.
Yes, thank you for coming on. I really appreciated being on your podcast. For my listeners, I'll put it in the show notes. But I wanted to have you on to talk about your podcast, talk about Interludes. First off, let me say I really, really enjoy your podcast. You have clips from everything, movies to music. So how did you get started with Interludes? First of all, how did that journey begin?
Well, I started my company, Pure Lighthouse Media, in Brooklyn. And I was, shooting short films. I was doing, weddings, photography, and the like. And one of my friends that I work with, we had done a little short film, and we actually showed it in the theater. He said, you should probably do a podcast. And I was like, oh, yeah, I should. And I just kept saying, nah, I'll get to it. Because, in New York, you're just kind of rushing. What's important is you got to pay the rent, you got to pay back your student loans. You're just focused in on a whole bunch of other things. So what happened was I had to come back to Chicago. Unfortunately, I lost my mom, and I transitioned back to my old home that I grew up in. And 7 months after she passed, the pandemic happened. So it gave me a lot of time to just kind of sit and reflect. And I was still deeply grieving my mom's passing. So I had to go, okay, well, how am I going to pivot in this, situation? And one of my good friends that we were both journalism majors in undergrad, he told me, hey, Val, I said, I'm thinking about doing this podcast, but can you help me out with that? And he said, sure. In fact, if you have the concept, I'll help write it for you. I'll help produce it with you. And I was thinking, I can't say no to this. And I had too many other people kind of in my ear from years ago. And we're talking as far back as 2011, 2012. And so in 2020, in June, we released our very first episodes. And Interlude, the name, I explain what it is, but I love music. And one of my favorite producers from back in the day is Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis.
Oh,
and then
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know, familiar with their music, right?
Oh, yeah.
And in 2022, just last year, they were honored with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And what was so brilliant is that Janet Jackson presented them that award. And
Yeah.
to see just kind of this full circle with them starting in the Minneapolis band, being produced by Prince, being fired by Prince, and then going ahead and doing things. They created this concept with their artists. Let's have a little music break or an interlude in between the songs. And I just kind of stole that idea. Like, I'm interested in that break sometimes. I'm interested in finding out what is in between your next, from your one great journey to the next. And some of the best interludes was from Rhythm Nation 1814. Love Janet Jackson, that album.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. And so she had an interlude called Come Back to Me. And it just was only 20 seconds. It kind of had like this beautiful violin, and it rose and it fell. And it went right to it. I think that album for her garnered, now I know I'm old when I say album, that CD garnered about 6 or 7 singles. So it was transitioning from, like, say, the fast break of the music, or in other words, the music that was like up tempo, to kind of the mid tempo slower songs. And so he did that with every artist. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis did this interlude thing with every artist they worked with. New Edition, Ralph Tresvant, The Human League, Sherelle, Alexander O'Neal. Like, I can go on and on and on. If they were like, oh, let's do a little music break, or let's do a little interlude. And I just stole that idea and was like, I want my entire podcast to be about that transitioning way for folks, for creatives, especially musicians. If you're in that in between and you're trying to go into that next direction of greatness, I'm like, I'll talk about that interlude. Like, ooh, what's happening? Ooh, what's going on? So yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that is very cool. I never realized, because I love music too, but I never realized the history behind the interludes, and I didn't realize Rhythm Nation had that many interludes. I guess I need to go back and check it out. It's been some years since I listened to it, but now, yeah, I'm gonna have to go in the crates and pull that out.
Exactly, yeah, because
wow.
if I think what was that? That was released my freshman year in college. So that was '89. Yeah, and I think she went on tour in '90, which, you know, now this year in 2023, Janet's gonna be on tour, and she's called it Together again, because her tour got canceled due to the pandemic. She's supposed to go on tour in 2020.
That's right.
Yeah.
My wife and I are going to see Jill Scott. We had tickets before the pandemic, and it got canceled, and she's back out again. So a lot of things are happening again. I guess that portion of our life was an interlude. I really, man, I'm gonna have to go back now. I'm going to be listening to all these different albums I grew up on, totally different.
And you just
now.
mentioned Jill Scott. Jill Scott kind of copied the same idea. She had on Who Is Jill Scott. She had a lot of little smaller breaks and stuff in between. So a lot of artists kind of swipe that idea, like, oh, even if it's just me joking around and talking, or just saying, you know, whatever. And people are like, where did that concept come from? Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Those are folks of the origins.
Wow. We got a history lesson, folks. I never knew that. Wow. So you touched on being a journalism major. How did you, out of all the things, journalism? First of all, I commend you for that. That's something I wanted to do growing up, but math and science was my thing, and that was what they were pushing in school. So I ended up getting a physics degree. That's a long story for another day, but I like to say that I paid attention well. That's, and I have a good memory. That's and it was some journalism classes that I wanted to take in school, but when I was going to school, they had this push for, whatever your path looked like, they wanted you, because it was even some carpentry classes and other stuff I wanted to take, but they were like, no, you're on the path to college, so you need to take these classes and these classes. So how did you get started with journalism? Like, what was that defining moment for you where you say, hey, I need to go to school for journalism?
I used to love to write short stories when I was in I don't know, 5th or 6th grade. I wrote poetry, especially if I wanted to express how I was feeling. And then I used to love drawing, little pictures that would go along with the stories. In fact, I found one of my old poems from when I was a teenager. Because, when I was growing up and young, I was an only child, and I transitioned from the Catholic school to the public school, and that was kind of like a cultural shock for me. So a lot of times I would channel into what I was feeling into writing. So I went to a vocational school and took up a trade, which ironically helped me when I was in between jobs. I took up, I think, secretarial science. So I learned how to type very fast, 80 or 90 words a minute, speed reading, shorthand stuff. None of that stuff. Yeah, none of that stuff is being used now, because that was back in the day. But when I went to college and they were saying, well, you want to do liberal arts, well, what do you want to study? And I thought, I want to do broadcast journalism. And I definitely I thought I wanted to be a television reporter, so I found out where exactly they go. They send them out to the field and stuff. People are like, oh, Oprah. I'm like, back in the day, Oprah was out there in the street with the mic on and interviewing people. She's been training for a long time. Her and Gail.
Yes.
It's rough out there, man. So I found my jam in doing college radio, and we used to cut Black History Month. What do you call it? We did Black History Month spots, because I wish, and even after I think about this, I wish I had gone to an HBCU, but I went to a PWI. Is that what it is? Yeah. And so I was always trying to get our voice represented on campus. So it was like, let's do this Black History Month. So I learned how to, I'm telling on myself, cutting on a reel-to-reel and splicing those things together so they would sync. And everything from my era, things were done analog. It was a reel-to-reel. If I shot a film, it was shot on a 16 millimeter. So I'd cut those and then put them together and look through a projector. And I got to the 2000s, and cultural shock was like, Val, we don't do stuff like that no more. I was like, really? So I decided to go to I went to NYU, and I got my master's in 3D animation and special effects for film. But I was learning anywhere from 10 to 20 programs, because I had never heard of Photoshop. I had never heard of Illustrator. I'd never heard of Premiere, Avid, Maya, Softimage, these other edit programs. And I was like, well, I'm sitting here doing the learning curve of 10 years, because it was 10 years between the time I got my undergrad and my graduate degree. So, because as of this year, Terrence, I'm coming up on my 30th year being out of undergrad, as I graduated in '93. Okay. Yeah. So it'll be 30 years this year.
Congratulations. And now that you say that, it'll be 20 years for me coming up this year. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll probably get a bunch of alumni stuff in the mail saying, hey, you're gonna come back and celebrate. And I'm like, who's performing at homecoming? Like I'd rather go to the homecoming at FAMU or I don't know, Howard or something we got going on. I was like, this is the experience I missed out on. But it's I would have flunked out if I went to Howard. I know that it was some good fine men. Let's keep going. I'm sorry. I was having a flashback. I'm sorry. I was having a flashback.
I went to an HBC. I went to Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina. And growing up, we talked about this on your episode that I was on, about just seeing a different world. It really put that in perspective. And even having a conversation with my wife the other day, I remembered going to see my uncle graduate. He went to South Carolina State. And I remember the excitement. I was a little boy, but I remember it being hot, because it was always at the football stadium. But I remember the excitement of seeing my uncle graduate, and it was cool to me. And I was like, I have to do that. And when I go to college, it has to be HBCU. At one point I wanted to go to South Carolina State, but they offered me a program at Benedict that I just had to take that opportunity in that route. But I wanted to go to Howard. I remember writing Howard in maybe third grade, writing them a letter, and they wrote me back. And unfortunately not old enough right now, but please keep us in mind when you get older. Yeah, so it's amazing how those things, like, we think we're going to go on a certain path and we don't, but the path that we end up going on, it takes us to places that we probably wouldn't have gone if we had gone on that other path. Like, even with this conversation here, had I gone to Howard, who knows what else would have happened in my life. And if I would have even written my books or had the push, I can't remember if we talked about this on your episode or not, but I was dating my wife at the time, and she gave me, matter of fact, we weren't even dating. She just,
this is beforehand.
We were friends. Yeah. And she was, I was telling her about these poems that I had in my head, and she was like, oh, okay. And I was like, yeah, it's pretty cool. And then she asked if I wrote it out, and I was like, nah, it's in my head. And she was like, a lot of good is doing there. So I was like, you know what?
You need to get this out.
I did that so fast that it was just like, yeah, here you go, check this out. So it's wow, yeah. It's interesting how different things put us, I'd like to say, put us right where we need to be and where we're supposed to be. And it's a part of having interludes in life. I really like that. I'm so glad that you broke that down. I mean, that concept, and especially me loving music, is just
it's something that, because there's a small part of me that wanted to be a musician, and I did learn how to play the piano and guitar, but I didn't 100% pursue it because, I love writing and I love producing and kind of being behind the camera. So it was all of these things that were, kind of mulling around in my head. But to be able to, and I directed choirs too. So that was a fun thing to do as well. So when I would kind of like look over to the musicians and they could vibe with what, where the direction the song should go, and they would feel me on that, it's something that's like, it vibrates through your whole body, and you're just like, yes. And that song, whatever that song is, gospel, hip hop, R&B, jazz, it just takes you to a place. My father was he's the one that taught me his love of music. He loved jazz. And he was very touchy about his jazz albums. I'd be like, Dad, let me listen to the Miles Davis. Don't touch my record. Don't you touch my record. And I mean, I had to get grown and get out of college before he was like, oh yeah, you could play it. I'm like, thank goodness, because it was like 10 years prior. He was like, don't touch it. Don't. What are you doing? Get your little hands away from me.
Yeah, my father has a bunch of I think he still has his records somewhere. But when like you say, it was like, it felt like we would just scratch it up or damage it. It was like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, I just want to look at this.
And I was the nerd that was always reading the musicians and who played on it and who wrote it. Like, I'm Rod Temperton. People are like, who's Rod Temperton? Rod Temperton wrote the vast majority of all of Michael Jackson's hits on both albums, Off the Wall and Thriller. And then initially started out with Heat Wave. A lot of people don't know that, but and he was a white British. He was from overseas. So once I did the deep
Wow.
dive in his life, and I think he had probably died within the last 3 to 5 years, I was saying, I've been listening to this man's music for decades and didn't know who he was. But reading those show notes, or at back in the day, reading the musicians and who played on them, who sang background, it was brilliantly beautiful, and it made me appreciate music all the more. You found out who was this? Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson had a great relationship, to where Stevie Wonder wrote "I Can't Help It" on Michael Jackson's "Off the Wall," and then Michael sang background for Stevie Wonder's "Hotter Than July," because these things happen within the year or so of each other. And then Quincy Jones, who he met on the Wiz movie, and that's how that collaboration happened. And he was like, I need someone to produce my solo album. He's like, sure. And let me grab Patty Austin. Let me grab James Ingram. Let me grab Greg Fillinganes. Let me grab these folks, and we'll come up, Rod Temperton, and let's, make these things happen. So I know a lot of this because I was only child, looking at the record albums that I was allowed to touch was the ones here at my house. And my mother wasn't that touchy about it. So I'd sit there and read. And then we would go to the record store and buy the records. And I'd be like, oh, Mom, we're going to get Thriller. She's like, yeah, I love that. The girl is mine. Mine. Yes, she's mine. Mine. Oh, that's so beautiful. Let's listen to that. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's one thing I miss. Reading the back of album covers, flipping the book open in cassettes and the books, because with streaming now, I'm that person who wants to know who produced this, who's on this song, and now you have to go to Google or whatever. It's not that readily available, and I miss that, just flipping open the book and looking and check it out. Wow. Yeah, that is my speaking of my wife, she wants me to let you know that she loves you. She loves your voice. She loves your energy. And we were listening to the House of Creativity when you were DJing, playing music and stuff, and she really, really loved that. Her father is a DJ, and he had a music room, and she loves music as well. So she just wanted to let me make sure I tell you that. Yeah, we really appreciate your podcast. I mean, for somebody who enjoys entertainment like we do, movies, television, music, it's really refreshing. Like I said, with those clips that you have, it's mind blowing how you work those in there and at the right time. Like, what does your editing process look like when it comes to adding those clips in and coming up with a finishing product?
That's a collaborative effort between me and my producer, and he's the one that initially pushed for that. And then I was thinking, well, what about copyright, or what about this, that, and the third? He was like, if we get the podcast branded as news, we're good. And I said, okay, so let's do that. And then I ended up getting an ASCAP license, which I now have to renew as it's coming up for it. So it's a matter of using clips in a positive way. So even if the owner heard it, they wouldn't have an issue with it, because we're promoting. And so the hope for 2023 is for us to get on with either HBO Max, Hulu, Netflix, and those peacocks and the like, and to say, hey, we want to be a podcast reviewer for some of your shows, and to just go ahead and present that. And so one of my favorite newer musicians is Robert Glasper, and I love him. I was over the holidays listening and watching The Best Man, the final chapters, and to read the credits, because good gracious, you know, they jump right to the next episode. You're like, wait, I want to read the credits. Wait, so you're like,
yeah.
So I saw that he did the music, and I was thinking, he tapped into the sound that was created by another musician from the original movie, The Best Man, from 1999. And it was just seamless to just hear, and really tempered the mood of the characters, what was happening. And I'm sitting here going, oh, he just scored this probably blindfolded, but I'm like, it works. And then I saw other musicians that were
Yeah.
called in, and I'm hoping to go ahead and review that soon. But I'm thinking, music creates such a wonderful, fantabulous mood. And when people and musicians and talented artists and creative artists pay attention to that, it's what makes either something worth watching, experiencing, and the like. You could probably name your favorite song, and it'll take you back to the first time you saw your wife, or the first time you you got a promotion, and there was some song on the radio that was playing, and it makes you think about that. And so I love I'm always very sensitive to that type of thing, and it's me, the budding musician that hasn't quite grown up, but then also the 7 and 8 year old that love to write and would listen to music and watch the record turn and the needle and the wheel, and that was all very magical to me. Like, where are the people inside of the box? Yeah. Are they on top of the record? Are they underneath the needle? I was always wondering all of those nerdy things, and then found out the electronic parts of all that. It was like, oh, okay, that's how that works.
Yeah, Robert Glasper. He's a genius. The Photograph soundtrack, I play that often, especially when I'm writing. It
sets a mood.
It puts you in a yeah. I mean, the whole movie was good, but the soundtrack really, really, really set the mood, and I really appreciate that about him. I always make a joke where I'm like, I just want to go to one of his sessions, because I know this is a big room with a bunch of people hanging out, and I'm like, I won't talk to anybody. I just want to sit and chill and that's it. Dave Chappelle probably be there a couple of times. I just want to be in the room. That's it.
And watch the creative process happen. I have the producer for our podcast, Kendall. He took me into a session with a professional, a very famous professional, and it was interesting to hear the beginning stages of a very popular song, because they were working out kind of the bars and the chorus, but they weren't 100%. And my cousin Kendall is a very talented, award-winning keyboardist. So he just kind of worked with him a little bit and was like, okay, you want this? And he's like, nah, change it again. And then they finally came up with it. And then when I heard the song on the radio months later, I was like, oh my gosh, they were working on that song? Because they didn't have a title for it. It was just still kind of in its infancy. And we went to, myself and another family member, we went to a studio session to just see them work. And it was just fascinating to just see that come together. And you're just like, oh my gosh, so that's how it works. And it was late too. A lot of musicians and creatives, the creative juices at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when you should be sleeping. And it's like, oh yeah, let's just play this.
Exactly.
Let me write this. Oh, gosh.
Before I let you go, you started your comedy journey. How's that going?
Oh gosh. So I literally was asked recently, because the person wants to bring me in on a monthly basis to perform, and he asked me how much I would charge, and I'm like, I don't know what to charge. And so I was thinking, you know what, I can do a 10 to 15 minute set, and I'll probably charge this amount. And I'm like, I'm very comfortable with that amount. But what I did was, he asked me, do you do clean? He's like, what kind of comedy do you do? Do you make fun of people? And I'm like, no, I'm a clean comic. And he's like, well, what is that? I was like, I'm making fun of myself. I'm making fun of situations that happen, all the things that you have in regular conversations that I thought about, and I build a joke around a scenario. And that taps into my writing, because I have, I sit down and I write out, the jokes. I sometimes run them by people, good friends of mine, that'll go, that didn't work. Or it took you too long to get to the punchline, like you need to shorten it. And so I love getting that kind of feedback, because it's good to see brilliance on display. We saw Chris Rock when he came to Chicago last year, And he didn't get to us till like October of last year. And so I was thinking he gonna be talking about that slap that everybody's been talking about. So, but Terrence, in the way that he approached it, it's like you didn't see it coming. It was brilliant. He just kind of talked about, well, he gave a scenario and he kind of presented that. And then he said, then the jokes came with, I compared myself to being in one movie, and then, Will Smith was in this movie. He was Ali and I was Pootie Tang. So that was funny. So, and then he went back and forth between, he said, I got knocked out by Ali. Just think about it. Like and so the way he presented that, and just, it was so funny. But I was thinking, he said he never wanted to play the victim. That's what it was. And he talked about the victim mentality, and he joked around about that. And then that's when he went into the whole thing. And I was like, I didn't see that coming. And to me, that's brilliant. And that's was good. Him writing it down. That's him working it, in smaller clubs and just kind of doing that. So I'm hoping 2023 will bring about that on that very famous, where you do 5 to 10 minutes, Tonight Show, the Sherry Show, or one of these big shows that says, we saw you, we thought you were funny, we'll bring you on, and Val the Voice gets out there as this comedian, and the rub's gonna be, yes, I decided to do comedy in my 50s.
Hey. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. I'm looking forward to following you on this journey. I'm very excited and happy for you. I'm a firm believer of it's never too late for anything. Yeah. And you're following your dreams, you're following your passions, you're making a difference. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I had to have you on there. You have a very sweet presence about you, and when you give information, it's from the heart.
Thanks.
And a lot of times we don't get to see that enough. We don't get to see positive things. We don't get to see people using their creativity, their talents, their blessings in positive ways. Seems like everybody wants to have what's hot now, negative stuff. They want to talk about negative things because it's popular and viral. But you stay true to your gift and your talent, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate you going live on Tuesdays.
I talk on Tuesdays. Yeah, we took a little.
Kudos to you. Yeah,
we wanted to interact with our audience, and that was fun. And we love talking about people of color in spaces of television, film, and sports. And ironically, the three of us, Coach Tony, the producer, Mr. Womble, and myself, we all graduated from the same school, North Central College, PWI.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm very grateful. One of our close friends recommended, talk to this man, have him come on your show. And then when I presented the idea, could you come on as a coach and just talk about sports? He was like, I would love it. And so we're now going into our second year of that whole platform, because it's an extension of the audio platform, Interludes. And I'm very excited for what 2023 is doing and is being. So it's it's gonna be stony gas, honey.
Hey, I'm excited for you. I'm planning on doing some video podcasting myself this year, so I might be reaching out to you for some pointers and some questions. So
all right, I got my phone ready.
Yes. Before we get out of here, let my listeners know where they can contact you, how to find your podcast, and any new things that you're working on that we need to be on the lookout for.
Right now, we have a Linktree website. I'm working on the purelighthouse.media.com website as we speak. But right now, you can find the podcast there, the link to our YouTube channel, which is Interludes, a Pure Lighthouse production. But I think it's just Interludes now. They shortened the name for it for the YouTube channel. And then we're also on Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Music under Interludes. and I've changed the name. I started out as, my government issued name, Valerie Johnson, but now I am known across platforms. Val the Voice, hashtag Val the Voice, or hashtag Interludes Interludes podcast. So that's where you can find me.
Thank you so much for coming on and just talking about music and podcasting. Music is man, and the whole writing process. I love short stories too, and I thought about doing short films. This interview reminded me of that, and that's something I need to pursue and do. So I thank you for coming on the show and helping me, expand where I am with this podcast and getting outside of just audio and just doing different things. So
being in the Brown Sugar Cafe is fun, as I always think about the D'Angelo song. I want some of your brown sugar. Yeah. Oh, I ain't gonna do too much. I don't want nobody to get sued. Okay, there you go.
All right. Thank you for joining me, and thank you all for tuning in. And as always, remember, keep pushing forward. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and this is the place where poetry meets conversation. Hit that follow button and turn on your notifications so you won't miss an episode. Check out my blog, thebrownssugarcafe.blog. Also connect with me on Instagram at thebrownssugarcafe. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, remember, keep pushing forward.